Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator. I'm all about capturing and curating career and life stories as a meaningful way to celebrate a milestone moment like a big O birthday, anniversary, retirement, or graduation. And I'm at my best when curating photo books that move your memories from the basement or your phone or your computer to the coffee table, giving you and your family and friends access to these treasured memories for years to come. I also love curating and capturing life and career stories through this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? It's a series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Jeff Pomranka. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And Jeff is the executive director of Meals on Wheels. And he was connected to me through someone from my Strategic Connections group. So I always love when someone's like, hey, you got to meet Jeff because I think he'd be great for your podcast. So, of course, Jeff and I then met, and then now we're here doing the interview. So again, welcome, Jeff.
Thank you much. Appreciate you taking time to talk to me.
We're going to pause for a moment to hear from a very happy Life Story Curator client.
My name is Eleanor Allen, and I recently finished a project with Kathy about my mother's life story. And the reason I wanted to do her life story was that she's first 91 years old, and second, we've been talking about it for years as a family. I have 4 brothers and many nieces and nephews, and we'd never gotten around to making the book. Then one day I was out with another friend who's a mutual friend of mine and Kathy's, and she showed me the book that Kathy had made about her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And I thought right then and there, this is the answer. I got to hire Kathy to get this life story finally done for my mother. So I did. And working with Kathy is just a joy and a pleasure. So first, how do you organize somebody's 90 plus years into a story that's succinct, but also very interesting? And Kathy helped guide myself and my niece and one of my brothers. I have 4 brothers. One of them worked on this project with us intensely into the storyboarding process, and then working into, okay, these are the chapters of her life we're going to work on, which we went by decade. And then for each decade of her life, what do we need? We need this many pictures and this many vignettes. And then Kathy also brought in this great idea to put in QR codes of recordings. I hadn't even thought of that, but we did several of those. Some are my mother's audio recordings. We captured some of those audio files. Some are video recordings of her telling stories of her life that we have in the book, but of course, much more detail when we have the recording. And some QR codes are also documents. So we put a link to my father's autobiography that he had written for us before he passed as well, and my grandfather's autobiography that my father had done interviewing my grandfather. So very special, and those come to life as well in the book. So I encourage you, if you have any inclination of documenting someone's life story in your life, definitely go for it. It's worth the work, and the product, in this case, my mother's story, is absolutely wonderful, and she was over the moon with joy. So don't wait, do it. Document the life of your loved ones or whatever special occasion there is, and work with Kathy, and you will have a wonderful experience.
You all know that I like to start with the icebreaker questions. So Jeff, the audience can get to know you as a human being before we get into what you do as the executive director of Meals on Wheels. So if you would, tell us where you grew up, what part of the country, and what your family dynamics were like, where you were in the birth order, and how you think both maybe shaped you as an adult.
Sure. So I think the easiest way to start with it is a lot of people might relate to that I was an Air Force brat. So grew up moving around, although fairly fortunate that I spent 9 years in Germany at one Air Force base. Not very common. Had a lot of friends come and go during that time, but I was there from 3rd grade through my junior year in high school. moved back to Colorado Springs my senior year in high school.
Wow. That is a long stint because usually isn't it like at every 2 years
Two
or
or
is
three
it?
years is
Yeah.
fairly common. Yeah, well, we got onto a small Air Force base, and my dad switched jobs 3 times so that he could retire from there. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
spent the last 9 years of his career, small little Air Force base that I don't even think is there anymore in Simbach, Germany. So
Wow.
that
So did you learn to speak German?
a little bit. I like to say that I learned to cuss on the soccer field and order a beer. So that's
All the important things in life.
yeah. That's what I was good at. Languages aren't my thing, but it's remarkable how it just kind of sinks in. I took a
Yeah.
lot of languages, German, but never comfortable with it, shall we say.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay. And how any siblings?
I do. I have an older sister and a younger sister. And so when you combine that with a father who was military, so often remote, I grew up in a very feminine household, I think, and strong females. My mother was an only child, and her father passed away when she was very young. So I think it was always a strong female influences, which I find very fortunate to have had. I think it's
Yeah.
probably shaped me more than I realize.
So middle child, and then what were the age differences between the three of you?
My older sister was 18 months older than me, and I should probably say was because she passed away 18 years ago from cancer. And my younger sister is 4 years younger than me. So,
Oh, so much closer with the older in age, and then
the older sister and I both fought like dogs and were best friends depending on maybe the day or the hour how things went. Yeah.
or yeah, whatever that was the situation at the time, right?
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. So, and then what activities did you do as a young child?
Um, my father, and growing up in Germany, a big soccer fan. So I started playing as early as I could. We moved to Germany, lived in a small village where my landlord's son was the soccer coach. So I started playing on an all German soccer team in a village of about 2,000 people. Didn't speak a lick of the language and such, but played soccer as much as possible at times, sometimes being on 3 different teams, a village team, an American team, and a high school team and such. So
Oh,
that
wow.
was really a lot of what I did.
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of let your sports do your talking 'cause if you didn't know the language.
A little bit, yeah. It's like, okay, we can do this and see what we did. And again, that's how I grew up, at least learning, what all the language was or the jargon for soccer. So I understood that well enough and just had fun playing. So that was probably a large part and has influenced me and stuck with me. I still coach to this day, so haven't been able to figure out a way to give it up.
It's in your blood.
Yeah.
In your blood. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Probably depends on the situation. I would tend more towards introvert in the idea that where I get my energy is by being alone and such. It's every now and then if I'm out and having to put on that outside networking and all that kind of stuff, I can do it. I don't have a problem like speaking into large audiences and such, but then it drains me and I just need to relax.
Yeah, then you need to be by yourself to recharge
Yeah.
the battery. Totally get it. Totally get it. Okay.
Yeah.
So on the fun meter, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being life of the party, where do you put yourself?
Depends on the size of the party.
Oh,
A large party, I'm a 1. A smaller party where it's fewer people and just I can be a little more fun. I'm probably never hitting the 5, but can be more fun. And as interesting as it sounds, maybe is if it's young kids and different types of just people who don't care as much, not adults and such, I can have a lot of fun. I do have experience working with kids and such and enjoy that. So if I can be goofy around young kids, I will get closer to a 5, but not necessarily reach it.
awesome. I love that. Love that. And I love too how most people have to explain it. And it's true because I don't think no one really fits into one of those two categories without some sort of explanation about why and how and what it means for them. So, okay, on the risk meter, same scale, 1 to 5, 1 being a low risk taker, 5 being high risk taker. Where do you put yourself?
So as I age and am not in the physical fitness that I used to be, my risk for taking physical activities is dropping. But I enjoy change. So if you can consider that a risk, I have no problem. It's like, let's try something and see what we can do. One of the things that I did was moved out to Colorado without a job. Neither my wife or I had a job. We just had an opportunity to live in a family house. It's like, okay, let's go. Dropped everything and moved out here. So in some respects, I will take risks, but in others, not so much anymore.
Yeah. I love that. The difference between professional and physical. Most people kind of break it into those things about, oh, I'm an adrenaline junkie or I'm not. Or in business, I do this, but then I'm more conservative over here. And yeah, so, okay. Well, both those questions I love because it just gives us a sense of who you are before we get into your story. And by the way, sometimes based on some of your answers as we get through this, I might come back and challenge your answers.
Sure.
Because some people are like, oh, I'm a 3.5. And then they start explaining some of the things they've done that I think are pretty high risk and really, cool risk thing. And I'm like, okay, you're more like a 5 or more like a 7.
Sounds
okay,
good.
well, Jeff, tell us what it's like to be the executive director of Meals on Wheels, and then we'll find out, how did I get here?
Sure. So it again probably depends on the day. Mostly it's fantastic. I love it. We have a strong team that does great work. We have amazing volunteers, a long history. I started this job 5 years ago, took over after a woman who had been here for 24 years. So I really understand standing on the shoulders of giants. She made an amazing program. She was very much a nutritionist, a foodie. So she built a kitchen where our food rivals anyone's. People constantly tell us how good our food is. Not everybody enjoys every single meal, but we do, provide good lunches, and we know that we get to eat it every day. So it is wonderful. That part is fantastic. It is also running a small business. So our budget is just around $900,000. And coming in, my biggest fear was I have all these people that I have to make sure stay employed and have jobs and get money, every 2 weeks. And for a while, just the simple fact of, did I do payroll correctly was nerve-wracking. So learning all those things, because this is my first role as an executive director, was fascinating and interesting. So it's both very, very rewarding because I get to read all the wonderful thank you notes that the people we serve send in. And it's also very stressful because I need to make sure that we continue to do as well so that people can remain living in their homes, because sometimes just a home delivered meal is all that they need to be able to stay remaining independent as much as possible. So
yeah, wow. Such a great service that you all provide. I mean, there's just amazing. I know we were talking before, you had mentioned that it wasn't just about those that have that are low income. There are other people that you help stay independent. And I mean, it's really the breadth of what you all do is really so important. So thank you for your service.
Oh, sure. It like I said, it is a ton of fun. Our days mostly are just wonderful. We get to hear lots of great things. We have 150 volunteers who come through here every week to help us. And so it's a lot of fun.
Wow.
That's for sure.
Wow.
Very rewarding.
So let's kind of step back a bit. When you were junior high school playing soccer, what did you want to be when you grew up? Were you thinking, at some point I'm going to run a nonprofit organization that provides meals for people?
No, I had no clue. I was relatively good at math and sciences and such. So I went to school thinking I started thinking I was going to be a physics major till I took my first physics class and quickly had to regroup and change. It was just well beyond anything I knew that I would ever be able to handle. Switched to math, which I was good at, but not anywhere near the top of my class in college and such. There were people who just, it came so much easier. When I was taking calculus of 3 or more dimensions or 3 or more variables, it didn't click. I don't know how to find the area under a 4-dimensional curve, so to speak. So I kept with math go because everyone said, oh, you should stick with math. You should, do that. And then I had, quite honestly, I had an opportunity from my school to take a semester and think about what I should be doing. So I went to a community college for a semester and took every ology that I could find, everything that had nothing to do with math or science. And landed on psychology. Enjoyed that. Child psychology was fantastic and such. And so came back and decided, let's take a little psychology, and switched very late in my college career to psychology. Just flat out dropped math. I think I'm a class away from two from a major in math. Don't even care. Switched to psychology, took 5-6 classes, spring semester my senior year, another couple over the summer so I could graduate, and have enjoyed it ever since.
Yeah. That is such, number one, such a big left turn, right? From math.
Yeah.
So it's the whole different shift in brain, right? It was left brain to right brain, or right. Yeah. Left brain is math.
Sure.
Right? So right brain. And, but I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed, and a similar thing happened. They went to college for that thing that they thought they were good at, or that someone thought that, had kept saying that they were good at. And then they were just like, this just not, I'm struggling. It's not, I don't like it. And then finally either some teacher in some other way or some class just lights them up. And then that's kind of the clue they needed to take a different path. So it sounds like that's what happened.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a difficult time to not do well in school, but a great time to go, okay, let's regroup and just explore. And I kind of wish that I would have done that a little bit earlier on in life.
Yeah.
But,
yeah,
I'm sure it's helped.
It's so hard. How do you figure that out? Right. That, I should have done something different when everybody kept telling me, or I thought this is what I wanted, or it seemed like it was a good fit. So, okay. So then probably you had to extend your college a bit since it was your senior year and changing.
Yeah. So I did an extra year and such. But that isn't that big of a deal, I guess. I don't know. So I did that. And the hard part was with psychology, or I guess any major that you're focusing on, that you get involved in and do all the fun stuff, work in a lab or do all those kinds of things and really get internships. I didn't have that. So I came out of college not knowing what I wanted to do, but didn't have any of the background of, I made all these connections through internships or that kind of stuff. So literally answered an ad out of the paper and started to work at an agency in St. Louis where I was, called Judavine Center for Autism, and started to help. I worked with two guys, one who was in high school and another gentleman who had just graduated high school. And after one came home from work and one came home from high school, I helped them with their daily living skills. They lived in a group home, and an old converted 15-bed convent that I helped them through life. They had a lot of significant support needs. And so we worked on all those kinds of things every day and for a while. Yeah.
So right from college into actually, stepping into a role helping like in the mental health field or the special needs field, I guess. I don't even know what to call that.
Yeah, we call it disability, but there's, it changes all the time. So I was in the nonprofit disability field and have done that primarily for a lot of my career. Yeah.
And were you getting paid for this? I mean,
yes,
or was it?
Not well.
Yeah.
It was tough. But I kind of enjoyed it. I learned how to work with people and how to help them get through things and helped. The easiest way to say is there were a lot of behavioral challenges that the gentleman that I worked with had. And so I really learned how to work with people and understand different behaviors and how to help them figure out what they wanted to do in a weird way. So, and I think that helped me a lot.
Yeah. So you weren't kind of imposing, well, you should do it this way, or this is how to do it. You were kind of like figuring out, well, what can they do? How could they do that with their disability, et cetera?
Yeah. In the perfect world, yes. I'm not going to claim that I was always perfect, and sometimes I'm sure that we would try to impose our thinking and such. So one of the gentlemen that I worked with really didn't use much verbal language, so it was hard to always understand what he wanted to do and such. So a lot of sign language and a lot of learning and understanding, trying to figure it out. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, as a young person, did you ever like do babysitting, or were you around kids or anyone with disabilities where you kind of had an insight or an empathy for this?
Not kids, but my father's older brother was born with Down syndrome. And I realized that much later in life. I'm like, oh yeah, I knew he had a disability, and I, knew that he had support needs and such, and but never really thought about it. He was just my Uncle Evan, and we hung out, and he liked to draw, and we liked to listen to records and such. When we saw him and such, and he would play and hang out with us. So I'm sure that had an impact. Consciously, never thought about it
but not
until
really.
much later.
Yeah. that I want to be in that field so I can help people like him, right? And
Yeah,
see what I can.
not at all. Never consciously thought about that at all.
Yeah. So you're helping these two gentlemen, and then where do you kind of move from there? I'm guessing that's takes a lot of energy. And
Yeah, and it was. I worked a Sunday through Thursday schedule, Sunday mornings, Monday through Thursday afternoon, evenings, and so that was difficult, and it did not pay well. So I was a doorman at a nightclub on Saturdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So I was working a lot. And realized that residential was 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and had the opportunity to move to the employment side at Judavine, where I would help people, get and keep jobs. So we did what was called job coaching, people with, again, significant support needs. So whether it was behavioral or something else, we would go and help them on the jobs. And I found that I really enjoyed that, helping people, and then also experiencing all these different types of jobs. Worked in a shoe factory where they created sandals, worked recycling centers, helped a guy who would wash FedEx trucks every single day as long as it was above 27 degrees. We were washing trucks and such. So it worked at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, home of the Cardinals, and all these kinds of things. So enjoyed that for a long time, and slowly worked up till I was running the program.
so when you said you worked in these jobs, you were helping people with disabilities get these jobs, and then
Yep.
you worked alongside them to help them be successful? Is that?
Yes. So the person would do the job. So we'll pick an example. One of the jobs was at Busch Stadium, where he was a condiment cleaner. So big condiment counters, you can imagine, by the concession stands.
Mhm.
You just walk around your level, making sure those are clean and full. And so he was perfectly capable. The gentleman I was working with there, we had a couple of guys who worked there, perfectly capable of doing the physical task, as long as he could stay on task and stay focused and not get too distracted. And as if something weird happened, I would be there to help maybe settle any, or help him work through communication mishaps and such.
Yeah.
So a lot of being a fireman, kind of just waiting for something to happen. It's like, okay. With autism being a communication disorder, a lot of helping at break time. So when everybody else is taking a break, it's like, all right, that's when I step up. It's like, this is how you get through the line. This is how you talk to your coworkers and those kinds of things. Trying to be as invisible as possible, or just naturally fit in, but helping them with all the human skills that they need.
Yeah, because break time is when things get more social and everybody's kind of chit-chatting and getting together. And yet that's probably where they're not as comfortable. They were better at, give me the task, tell me what to go do, I'll go do it. But now I'm supposed to sit here and make small talk.
Yes, very much so.
Wow. Okay. So then you got exposed to a lot of jobs, as well as so did these folks. So, okay. And then you ended up running the program.
Yep. And just kept, without going through my entire career, kept with employment, worked at a couple different places, a mental health center, went to what's called an independent living center, where I ran employment and education programs, where we would help people with all types of disabilities. So someone who had a spinal cord injury to someone with Down syndrome or autism, help find and keep jobs. did that for a long time until I was on the board of the Down Syndrome Association in Greater St. Louis. When I started there, they had no paid staff. And so a couple changes, hired an executive director, let go an executive director, asked me and another woman to become the leadership. She took the programming as the executive director. She had a lot more experience with that, and I did the operations. And so that kind of got me out of the employment field, still disability field, and kept moving on from there.
Yeah. So you must have been finding this incredibly rewarding to stay in a field like that. But I'm assuming still maybe the pay wasn't where you wanted it.
Yeah, unfortunately, nonprofits, sometimes we do it to ourselves. We think, oh, well, it's a nonprofit. We don't need to pay well. So that was always difficult. And still trying to figure out how to keep my interest going. You know, if things got easy, it would become a little bit boring. So it's fun to have a job where you're constantly being pushed and trying to learn and figure out new things.
Yeah. Well, and then also being on the board. So being in an all leadership role versus being in the execution role, but then you moved from board to execution.
Yes.
Because, you know, you also saw the need there, and probably that was a unique skill set that you brought as a board member. So yeah, it's helpful. I was on a board, and then I actually stepped in as the interim CEO and president, and it was really interesting to have been a board member, been board chair, and then now to be running it going, wow, okay, I'm sitting in a different seat. And even though you think, oh, we're all on the same team, there's still a very different perspective.
Very much so. Yeah, it is difficult to, understand unless you've been in both positions. It's difficult to understand what each is like.
I can relate. I was on a board, and I can't tell you how many times we said, oh, let's just bring in more volunteers. And then when I was, working closer with the team or I was running the team, bringing in volunteers was always such a challenge because, volunteers work for a while and then their real job gets in the way or life gets in the way. And all of a sudden they're like, well, I can't be there on that day, or I can't be there tonight at the meeting. And they're the ones running the meeting. And you're like, whoa, now what? So yeah, it can be such a challenge to be on the operations side.
It does. It's everything looks good on paper, and then we deal with people and lives and such, and it makes it a fun, interesting puzzle. That's what I'm trying to get to. Is it's no longer problems; these are fun puzzles to solve. Some days that works, some days it doesn't.
Yeah, it's great to have those kind of mindset tricks, so to speak, right? To stay on the positive side of things, because if you go down that negative path, that it is just a spiral, and unfortunately that inner critic voice of mine can take me there way too much faster than the positive one. So I do have to have those mindsets of, well, what am I really trying to accomplish here, and stay connected to the purpose.
Yeah, we look at it, and I tell people things we have, bad days where things don't go well. I'm like, did meals go out? Did people eat? We're all good. We'll fix it tomorrow. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Meals went out, we're good.
Yeah, getting it done. So, okay. So you were bored, and then you're on the your operations then. So then How did you end up then in Colorado?
So a couple job changes, fun stuff. Last job was starting a KIPP elementary charter school. And I started that in March of, I think, 2015. And maybe 2 months later, my sister says, we don't want to live in the family house anymore in Loveland. Do you want it? And we're like, yes. We're very fortunate up here in Loveland. The house where my mother grew up, they bought in the 50s. My grandmother and grandfather bought in the 50s. My mother and father are like, we don't want it. It doesn't have a big backyard for our dogs. They moved up to Estes. My sister was tired of it because it's on a busy street. And she's like, we're moving off the busy street. We want to move to downtown Loveland. So I got a free house.
Wow.
And could
that
not
doesn't
pass
happen
it up.
every day.
No.
Well, and you get to be back where it sounds like your family was in Colorado. So you get to be closer to family, and wow.
Yep. So my sister is, less than 2 miles away. My parents moved up to Estes Park. They're like, well, if you're coming back, we're going to move up to northern Colorado. They were in Colorado Springs. So they moved up here. So we're all closer together and being able to enjoy things, because I was gone from my family from college on. And so didn't live close. And it's a weird thing, I think, being a military, you kind of get used to not being around family. So it's not as big of a deal as it is for my wife, say, who's one of 25 grandchildren. So huge family reunions. We just don't do that. So but now we have the opportunity. My kids get to see their grandparents on my side a lot more, although my kids are growing and getting to college and such. So yeah, opportunity, move to Colorado, jump with both feet with absolutely nothing except for a house.
Yeah.
And came out here and didn't do a whole lot for the first 6 months, to be frank. My daughters are like, are we going to have enough money? Sure, we're fine. We sold a house.
That risk taker that you had said early on, right? Is that, but but to have a house here is, I mean, that is kind of a big deal, is to know this is where we're going to be. This gives us the roots, and then the other stuff will fall into place, is probably what you're expecting. And knowing your work history, it sounds like you've been able to just start and restart and reinvent yourself. I mean, you talked about going from like behavioral into now starting a school. Yeah. And I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
And it's interesting, as I was looking at all this, it really comes down to what I think has helped me is I'm not outward, networker and all that kind of stuff. I don't enjoy networking meetings. I'm not good at it. I will go and talk to one person, but I think every single job interview that I've gotten, I won't say that any jobs have been given to me, but every job interview that I had a connection with them somehow. Through someone that I've known. Even when I moved out here and knew all of like 4 people, one of them was executive director at another nonprofit who happened to know the current board president of Meals on Wheels. So when I applied, again, via a job posting for the Meals on Wheels job, she told the Meals on Wheels board president, who she knew from being her board president, Jeff's a good guy. And I had met her, 5 times or something. Just she was a friend of my sister's. So every time it's like I've moved, it's been from a network of people that I've known without, in a weird way, without networking. I tell people here all the time, you just got to go and show up. So we go to a lot of things as Meals on Wheels, and I go to a lot of things as Jeff and the executive director of Meals on Wheels here in Loveland. And just, my dad has a saying, you make your own luck. So I think I've made my own luck a lot of times.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I love hearing that story. At the same time, that type of story frustrates the heck out of me, because when I was, after I left corporate and I was looking for that next role, and I would talk to people about, well, how did you get where you are? And they, I just fell into it. I got so lucky. And I'm like, how do I fall into something? And how do I make that luck happen? And maybe part of it was I was trying too hard. I was doing the networking, but I wasn't really clear on what I wanted, because I could fit in so many ways. I'm much clearer now about, I really want to find that right connection of who are the people I want to be working with, not necessarily what are the things or what's the company. Does that make sense? I mean, it's really about
really does.
Who.
And if, I do a lot of quoting of Simon Sinek and your why and such. Had no clue what my why was until I started to look back. And I had never worked with older adults before. I had never really worked with food before, but helping people be able to live the lives that they want really fits everything that I've done in my career.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's what I think you explained to me when we talked the first time, is I was focused on the meal portion and food insecurity and that part. And you're like, no, it's about just what you said, allowing people to live the lives that they want to live. And sometimes it is just that meal to give them the nourishment or that one break for the day.
Yeah.
They don't have to do that themselves. And wow.
The food really helps us, is the key that opens the door to help us come in and help people, have someone to talk to. Our delivery drivers will say frequently, I delivered to Bob, and the people who are delivering the meals are the only people he's going to see this week. That's the only, so isolation is a big part of it. And helping people stay connected. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like it is difficult to say, oh, just go out and do things and things will happen. If you go and go to events or be seen at places, good things happen. I think that's, at least for me, how it works. Again, I'm not outgoing. I am not a big, vibrant person who walks in and controls the room or anything like that. But I think I show up a lot and friendly and nice, and people get to know you. The first time I went to a brewery here and they're like, it's Pomranka, right? I was both ecstatic and embarrassed that I had been to the brewery enough that they know my name. So it's like, oh, yes, it is. But it's all paid off.
Yeah, it's just like Cheers, right? You want to go where everybody knows your name. So a couple questions there. One is, how did you find Simon Sinek? Because you mentioned him. So what kind of led you to that? And then the other one is how did you kind of sell yourself to Meals on Wheels when you hadn't been in that role before? So just those two things.
Sure.
I asked a lot of questions.
Yeah, that is all right. I distinctly remember Simon Sinek. I stumbled across him from some person on Twitter way back when, with his first TED Talk. Like when it came out, someone posted on Twitter. I am not good at social media, but I love all that technology. So I've been on Twitter for since 2007 type thing. So for a long time. So I know that that's how it came about. And then I just dove in. If you like that, I keep following it and reading all his books and stuff like that. And then how did I convince them that I could do this? I think that it's a good question, because one of the things that we need is all of our meals are analyzed by a nutritionist or an RD, a registered dietitian, and they have to be for our federal funding. And like, what are you going to do? The previous executive director is a registered dietitian. How are you going to do that? You're not. I'm like, yeah, but we hire accountants. We hire someone. Why would I spend my time doing that when there's so many people who can do it? The fortunate part that I didn't know during the interview is our previous executive director has stayed on as an amazing volunteer, still analyzing all our meals. So the point is moved.
Yeah.
So I do think I became good at interviewing, and really that's when I was really focusing on not the specific details of how you run like a staff meeting, but more the why and how to build a team. And that's what I wanted to learn how to do is really learn to build a team that can do more than they think they can. Yeah. And so somehow it worked. Couldn't tell you the specifics. I remember at the end of my second interview, one of the staff stood up and, not whispered, but she's like, that's the best interview I've ever seen. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Because, so I honestly, I don't know how. Luck, studying, practice.
So they're impressed with your interviewing. You said you got good at interviewing. Did you feel confident interviewing? Because sometimes how you're coming across, you're like, you leave going, oh man, that didn't go well. And then you get the call that like, oh, we loved how genuine you were, or how you admitted you didn't know this or that,
I think that I was comfortable. And it was one of those interviews, I was sitting at the end of a conference table with 10 or 12 people around it, taking times asking me questions. Mm-hmm. And somehow in my life, I've become comfortable at public speaking. It might be because my first job that I ever had was, I was a DJ for schools. School dances. I started that in junior high. So automatically you have to learn how to talk in front of all your peers and such, So I remember being a junior high student DJing for high school students. So I just got to the point, it's like, okay, they're just people and they just all want to hear what I have to say. And so I think about that, it helps.
It does. And I just love how you said you focused on the why and the purpose and how to keep connecting people to that, not about the how and the what. And that's, if I'm, someone interviewing you, that's what I want a leader to be focused on, because you've got a bunch of people that can make that happen if you keep them focused on the why. And so anyway, very cool.
Yeah, we have an amazing staff. I am not really allowed in the kitchen. I can do the dishes. That's about my skill level. But yeah, why would I get in their way? It's like, and I try and tell them all the time, who's ever closest to the problem probably has a solution. And if you're not comfortable making that decision, I'll help you. And yeah, I don't have to make those difficult decisions. They usually do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I just go,
By
yep.
talking through it and how do we solve this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I could talk to you for the rest of the morning, but we are going to have to close this at some point because I do like to keep these at a certain
Sure.
length. So
Thank you very much. Yeah.
This has been amazing. So I do have two summarizing questions. The first is, when you look back at your career now, what do you think served you best? Was it a habit, a characteristic, maybe a strength of yours? What do you think served you best?
So there's probably a couple things, but I'm going to go with one. And I have a coworker here who I rely on heavily for things. And I said, okay, I knew this question was coming. I'm like, I don't know what has served me best. It's like, what is it? And she says, you remain calm when things go wild and crazy. And without being a long story, we put on a fundraiser where we closed down streets. And because of construction, they told us, the day after our alcohol permits and everything has been set up, oh, you can't close down the street because there's construction and we can't let you do that. And my development director said she was panicked, like, what do we do? And I was like, we'll fix it. Don't worry about it. They will not do that. The person who's telling us is doing their job, and we'll just find until we can get to the place who says, yes, we can do it. And of course, it all worked out. We have this amazing fundraiser up here in Loveland that I guarantee people would have been furious if we wouldn't be able to put it on. So it's like, don't worry. We'll just stay relaxed, stay calm. We'll figure it out, and we'll find the answer to this puzzle as opposed to a problem. And she told me, she's like, yeah, if I was at my previous employment, I might have been forced to tears. But it's like, yeah, we'll just stay calm and figure it out. I don't know when that happened. I do know that I'm able to do that now, much more than probably ever before. And maybe it goes back to really when I started, as I'm thinking about starting my career, working with adults with autism who would have very difficult, and they would call them, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, fits. And it's like, all right, we'll figure it out. And I've had, one guy who cleared the desk of the owner's office and put a couple holes in the wall. And, while he was working, it's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. He kept his job. He was a good worker.
Yeah.
Boss knew. So
wow.
I've seen a whole lot of worse things.
Yeah. Well, and when you've experienced that, you're like, it can't be as bad as that, right? And you're like,
there is, yeah.
So
it's
you
like,
just stay calm. You stay calm. Wow.
It all works out. It all seems to always work out.
Yeah. Well, and we need people who stay calm because it is easy to go down the off the cliff. So, okay. So last question then. Any words of wisdom that impacted you over the years? Either someone said to you, or maybe you use when you're in a fit or in a storm.
Yeah. And it does tie in. It's a silly little saying that I really enjoy, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And it's like, oh, wait a second. The easiest example everybody can relate to is think about clearing out that elementary school of hundreds of kids for a fire drill. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. If everyone runs, we're in trouble. If everyone is slow and smooth, we'll get out of that building quickly. And it works with everything. Physically, mentally. For me, I think slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Wow. I love that. When I think back of all the different leaders I had back in corporate, you had those hard charging drivers and everything had to be so fast. And I remember we would jump from priority to priority and we never really finished things, right? And then you had those leaders who, and this is what I gravitated to you, because I was like, well, let's be more deliberate with our decision making. Let's think it through. Let's talk it through. And then we can execute and start moving, and we'll get there. But
Yeah.
but if we just have to jump right away, many times maybe we jumped off the edge versus just jumping
Yeah.
forward.
It
So
just and I try and think long term, and it really helps out. It's like, what's this going to do long term? Will this be beneficial? And so sometimes we do a lot of work short term for our own internal customer service to make things easier for us later on. It's like we're going to put in the effort now, the slow part now, because that'll help us smooth things out so it'll be faster in the future.
yeah, love that. Well, Jeff, thank you. It has been a pleasure getting to know you and to know about the work that you're doing up there in Loveland. So thank you for sharing your story today. And listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you will be alerted as other interviews are published. If you have any questions for me or for Jeff, you can find this interview and his social media contact information on my website, lifestorycurator.com. And on that note, I'll say stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing the stories. Have a great day.